All right, is it recording? Does it look like it's working? All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to CS Lab Startup Meeting. The meeting should be pretty brief because a lot of us are pretty familiar with the material. We still have some things to go through and discuss for a bit. Let's get started with a word of prayer. Lord, we thank you that you have given us this opportunity to gather together and also think about how we could serve other students in their learning process. And as we do this important work together, Lord, help us be reminded that you're the one who's ultimately the one that we're serving, the one that we want to glorify. Lord, help us decrease and may you increase. That the things that we do would really be beneficial to these students' lives and also a good testimony as we do these things, and that it will glorify you. Well, we commit the following time as we discuss things into your hands. We commit this entire semester into your hands. Help us use the CS Lab opportunity wisely and effectively. Lord, we thank you. Pray this in your holy name. Amen. So you have access to the document that I'm showing from the calendar invite. So feel free to pull it up and then you can look at it on your own accord. We'll go through some of these things, but before we do that, Dr. Albing's here to address you for a bit. Dr. Gossett is a bit busy and he couldn't make it, so I have certain things I'll announce for him, but otherwise, Dr. Albing.
So this is my chance. Okay. My apologies if the sound is weird. I've had people report problems with my microphone, with my sound, but it's not the microphone. I've tried a bunch of different things, and I'm hoping it's at least understandable. Is that okay? I appreciate what you folks do in CS Lab. It's great to have that extra resource to point people to. I really am glad that we have something like that for our students, and you play a big role in that. But I want to reiterate or maybe even strengthen my appeal this year to encourage you when helping my students to not write code for them. Now, I know that sounds kind of obvious, but sometimes like, oh, you'll just write something on the board. Okay, well, that's maybe still too much code. I'd rather you do something along the more the Socratic lines of asking them questions. It's like, well, I need to write a loop. You know, you need a loop, right? So how would you loop? And we'll make them come up with the answer for what that loop would look like. Or if you see something grossly missing, you know, like a missing semicolon, point them to the error message that says it's a missing semicolon. Don't just say, oh, put a semicolon in there, that'll fix it. I find myself very prey to that as well, because I'd like to get them moving and get on to another student that needs help. But the problem is that doesn't help them enough. And it's real frustrating sometimes for me because I know what code needs to be there, and it just hurts not to say, well, just do a for loop that does, or you know, do a while loop, or they'll say, well, like, you know, they got some while loop with something absolutely silly inside. Or I've had students look at me and say, well, what am I supposed to type? And the answer is you're supposed to type what needs to be typed to get that syntax correct to do what you want to do. But some of it is making sure that they are it's agency. You know, it's that they have the power to do this. It's not just the trained SEAL act. We're not trying to teach them how to respond to like a trained SEAL. We want them to conceptualize what's going on and be able to put that into code. And so while I know that's a real struggle and might slow you down, I want just one more, you know, appeal to say, please do whatever you can to never write down code in front of them. I mean, explain stuff to them, tell them it's right, tell them, you know, give them hints or tell them what to look for in the book, or but try very hard not to actually just say, oh yeah, and put, you know, now a semicolon, oh yeah, put a 1 or a, you know, it's like, well, that should be less than 10, not less than or equal to 10. You know, let them struggle through it, because I think they learn it better when you do that. So is that just impossible to ask because you've got so many students coming in to time-wise? Okay, well, that's my appeal. And again, I appreciate so much what you do. but I'm making more of an effort. Well, I made more of an effort last semester, and I'm increasing it even this semester to like sit on my hands and not type code, but make them come up with the answer. Okay, so thanks for that, and thanks for what you do. And of course, if you're finding something that's really missing, I do appreciate those notes that you put in the CS Lab summaries that say, they were, this concept wasn't getting through, or we had 3 people and we're all struggling with this idea. Now we've got 34 students in 205 this semester, so 3 doesn't represent as big a percentage as if it were a smaller class, but still, I do notice those. I read those very regularly whenever you guys send me those summaries, after those nights. And when do you start up? Remind me again when first night of, it's hasn't happened yet, right? It's coming up.
We start next Thursday.
Next Thursday. Okay, good. So I'll save all the hard assignments until at least Thursday. Good. Thanks. Any other questions before I disappear? Okay. Again, thank you, and I hope you have a good year or a good semester.
Thanks, Dr. Hawking. All right. Let's see. So you should probably not look at my screen. You have this document, but I figure I'll have it on my screen. I didn't want to screen share because then we can see each other more easily. All right, so I'll start from the welcome introductions portion and then go from there. So okay, so we saw some professors. You know who I am. Feel free to call me Jed if you feel comfortable doing that. For managers, we have Katie Sanderson, who's new, replacing Naomi. So you might have some interactions with her, not a lot probably, but just know that she's a person that's involved in this process now. And remember, if you have any tutor labs or Zoom issues, let Ruth and myself know. Alex is still a lead tutor. Ethan and Cecilia are new lead tutors. Yeah, and so help them out as they get used to things. Be kind to them. You're all friends, happy family, so I'm sure you will do that. New tutors, Kaylin is completely new this semester, and Garrett started during interim. So they're fairly new, so guide them and help them through the process, some logistical things that they're not used to doing, or just if they're very overwhelmed, be kind to them and help onboard them. You remember when you first started, right? So help them along, because this semester is the last semester for several of us, yeah? And so we need new people joining us. So let's see, Alex, Cecilia, you're graduating, John's graduating, yeah? And Aiden is graduating, yeah. So we need a lot of new people. So let's hopefully keep Kaylin and Garrett, and then we can recruit some more people. Let's see. So I have a list of returning tutors here. And then there are 3 on-call tutors. Garrett, Josh, and John, you're on-call. And so last fall, we did this for several sessions. Yeah, and I thought that worked quite well. I asked you during our mid-semester check-in, and I think it's a really good thing to have that support, but also to be good stewards of Bethel's resources. So I would say the on-call tutors are signed up to be willing to be called in all the time, but they're also placed on call because of certain reasons. For instance, I think Josh, maybe you have discrete lab right before this on the same day or something of that sort, right? And then John is also running a discrete session. Garrett was very busy. I had to strong him into continuing after interim. Right? So there's a reason why these people are sort of employed like maybe half the time or so forth. I would say if you're busy, don't hesitate to call them in. I'm sure they want to work too. They signed up to do this, so don't be hesitant to call them in. But if you don't need them, and it's like just one student there, don't call them in to waste Bethel's resources. I think that's common sense, but I just want to reiterate that how this framework will work. And for the on-call tutors, remember you always report 15 minutes for just being by your phone and attentive to whether you get called in or not. So that would be the incentive to be around, and then make sure your lead knows how to get a hold of you in an efficient way and you're actually available for that. So those are just some quick things. Any questions or comments? Feel free to interrupt at any point. Some quick announcements. It says everybody, including on-call, should come 15 minutes early for your first shift. This was left over from the fall semester. A lot of you are returning. I don't think you need to do this, right? But you do have the option of being 15 minutes early once a semester. Okay, so feel free to use that wisely. For leads, you should always come 15 minutes early. And we got approved for non-leads to come 15 minutes early once to just be onboarded if you need to. Many of you don't. So you don't need to do that. There are some documents, blah, blah, blah. You know this format of tutoring. Hybrid worked really well, so we'll keep doing that. John mentioned last semester to me that a headset is useful for CS Lab when you're doing hybrid. So I'll get a headset and I'll get it to Ruth, who put it in that box. And so you should have access to that. Hopefully we'll have that in place by next Thursday. Let's see. Variable attendance, please let me know if you get overwhelmed, or on the other hand, if you're very overstaffed and you don't think we need that many people. And remember last semester, we adjusted times, right? And we shifted people around. I think Cecilia volunteered to be shifted around, and Alex ran another session at the same time as his discrete session. Like, we want to be adaptive to student needs. Yeah, and then we'll also review this and maybe make sure that next fall we would be putting the right number of people and the right number of slots in the various places. So I want to know these things. The numbers that I do get reports of how many people show up, but that doesn't always tell me whether you're busy or not. Yeah, and I think you can understand why. So feel free to leave me comments if it's too busy or not busy at all, just so we have the record of that. You might forget too at some point. So each time, if it's something drastic, let me know either way, and then we really can adjust, including moving some on-call people to be more permanent, or vice versa, and things like that. So speak up. Earlier in the past, we were worried that maybe we need to cut down on hybrid to be only partial, and at one point Math Lab also did that, and I think by now we're pretty comfortable with it being hybrid the full time. But again, just tell me any issues that you encounter and we can problem solve together. I'm here for you so that you can be there for our students. There are room maps linked from here, which I assume will be printed out and such, and so it will all be good. Student access, blah, blah, blah. I pulled up the numbers for spring CS Lab so you just can get a sense. Remember last spring, there's 369 contacts, but that's a lot of algorithms, people working there on their own and so forth. But still, I think even if we subtract that, that's still more people than 2 years before, and certainly the year with only 68 students. There's some anomaly throughout the world for some reason. Okay, so anyway, I think this past fall, we had more contact than previous falls, a lot more actually, and we're seeing this trend. So CS Lab is healthy and growing, and in fact, we're one of the labs that are the most efficient in terms of our tutor time versus student time. And so we're doing well, and we can always have more tutors. We have budget for more because we have so many students. So if you feel overwhelmed, let me know. The schedule is on that right, and it's also in the tutor packet. For those of you who came a little later, remember there's a link to the tutor packet at the top of the document to go there and check your classes and your information and initial in 2 places. If if you already initial in one place for math lab or TA, you don't need to initial again for obvious reasons. If there's anything that looks wrong, make sure Ruth knows before you leave today. Okay. If you can tutor more classes, tutor more classes. Now get more multicolored badge so other people can be jealous of you. But you don't need to. We balanced it that every course is covered in all the sessions, and it's fine. So if you don't feel comfortable adding more courses, we're okay. Zoom links are different each day, so just remember that. When you need to have subs step in for you, remember to let a huge list of people know. And the list is in the box in number 2 at the bottom. So we each have to do something when you want to sub. So let that list know. Oh, for new people who are not here, you should probably read this more carefully. Everybody in this meeting right now, they're old, so I don't feel like talking about all the details, but you know how to read, so yay. Let's see. Oh, and I want to go back up for a moment. At the very top, it says on off-campus tutoring opportunities. For on-campus tutoring, that's what you're doing in CS Lab, and some of you might be asked to do individual tutoring depending on whether you checked some box in some survey at some point. There's also off-campus tutoring, and off-campus tutoring simply means that it's not organized by Bethel, but the off-campus tutoring often happens physically on campus. So you might be able to do some off-campus tutoring physically on Bethel campus, even if you don't drive and stuff like that. And if you're interested, you should do that. And did you get a survey about that already? Anyone? Not yet. Okay, so we will be sending out a survey for that. In the past, we asked you whether you're interested or not in that roster you're initialing, and then we only contact those people who are interested. This year, we decided we'll just send out the survey to everybody. And you don't need to respond if you're not interested. But if you're interested, that survey gives you a bit more information. So as you're filling out, at least even glancing at the survey about off-campus tutoring, you'll get a sense of whether you actually want to do it or not. So we thought like actually giving you the survey would be helpful to help you decide. One of the nice things about off-campus tutoring is you get to decide your own rate. So you can often charge higher rates. But then, of course, then you might need to drive somewhere or meet with other people. We don't get a lot of requests, but usually this is when some parents of high school students will contact the math CS department, and we'll try to connect them up with people who already volunteered. Because by the time they ask us, it's too late for us to scramble to survey you to see if you're interested or not. So look for that in your email at some point and please respond. Oh yeah, and at the top that I skipped over, there's a list of courses that we are covering. And notice that there's very few in data structures, but that tracks with Spring. And then as Dr. Albing mentioned, he has a lot in scientific computing. He forgot he actually had 36 previously. So 34 is actually not that many, but it's still a lot. Yeah. And so those are some numbers that could help you get a sense of how many people are coming fraction wise for the course. So you get a sense of, is everybody in that course struggling, or is really a huge class and 3 people are coming and those are the struggling students? So you can get a sense there. All classes meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which is why we only have 3 sessions. They're longer. They're a little longer than when you first got surveyed. And I think we reiterated that when we got you to confirm it. So hopefully that works for you. So you have less, overhead in trying to get to meetings and just like be there a little longer to get students resolved with their issues, like computer science issues. And assignment access should be through Moodle. Last fall, we deprecated using course folders, and this spring we're removing that deprecation warning, like it's gone. Yeah, and so no more course folders because you weren't using them, and the profs don't really want to keep it up. But they'll give you Moodle access. I believe most of you don't have Moodle access yet because we wanted to finalize after this meeting, see if anyone wants to be tutors for more courses, and then we'll send them that list after this meeting. So again, if you want to tutor more courses, or at least like get added to those Moodle thing, stay behind a moment when we're done to let me know. And then we might have some course emails from Dr. Gossett. You remember getting those in the past. Typically sends them out on Fridays to give you a heads up on what's coming. And then assignments for object-oriented programming, it's often Wednesday. For other classes, it's like, who knows, right? These are projects that are due whenever it makes sense to be due. Any questions or comments?
Do you think we'll be doing any announcements for CS Lab this semester?
Did we do CS Lab announcements in the past? Yeah. Do you like doing CS Lab announcements?
I think they're helpful for getting the word out.
Ethan likes doing CS Lab assignments, announcements, and Ben thinks it's helpful if Ethan go make announcements. Yeah, we'll make some announcements. Usually around time when students have noticed that they're actually struggling by getting some kind of indicator from their professors, right? So in a few weeks, we'll do something of that sort. Other questions or comments or jokes? So, in a moment, I'll turn it over to you to maybe mention some hints to one another and some tips and so forth. But I want to say a few more logistical matters, and then we'll do that. So it's always good to keep in mind that we're glorifying God in whatever we do, and while we're working with students, then we're serving these students, making sure they can be successful. So there's some attitudes and responsibilities that should be pretty self-explanatory. I won't go over them, but they're there that you can read later, especially for new people. Make sure students sign in and out. That's good to be reminded of, because if students later want to get individual tutors, then they need to establish a record of coming to CS Lab. So you'll be helping them help themselves, especially the students who tend to forget to sign in and out. They might correlate with students who really need that record later. So help do that. Your sign-in is different. And so make sure you have access to Moodle and check that in a few days. And if you still don't have that, let me know. Give comments at the end of each session. Dr. Albing mentions he really reads those. And I'm sure Dr. Gossett reads that the moment you send it out, right? And for me, I'm not teaching CS courses this semester, but I did in the past. And when I teach math, I'm teaching math classes. I can say that I'm pretty sure we all read those comments very carefully, and we really care about those feedback. So keep writing those. Keep in mind that if a professor has a student who came to your session, then they'll get that email, and they won't know whether you're talking about their students or some other professor students. So if you're making a comment and there's a mixture of students and you're making a comment about scientific students, then put a like scientific colon or something. Yeah, so Dr. Albing knows to read that part, and then Dr. Gossett would know to ignore that sentence and things like that. So that's a really useful, quick way of communicating things back to the professors. This is like a thrice weekly feedback thing. It's very useful. Help each other write those things. You don't need to only have the leads say something. Yeah, so notice anything, let the professors know. If it's something that's worth writing a longer email, feel free to do that. I know all the professors would be glad to have that feedback and dialogue. You can also track them down and say things to their face, right? So all those things are available to you, and we appreciate that. Let's see. I mentioned about Moodle. Through Moodle, you can access assignments, class lists if you need it, and the syllabi, which is why we don't ask the professors to provide those information anymore in course lists, course folders. It's often perhaps useful to know what the assignments are. Unfortunately, you don't get paid to do that prep work outside of your working hours. But I believe that students don't necessarily always barge in the moment CS Lab opens, and your lead would have been there 15 minutes early to possibly already be looking at this. So you should be able to find time to review stuff. So if you have downtime, take a look at those projects even and look ahead, for example. Don't just be there and twiddling your thumbs. So use that time wisely to prepare ahead. If it comes to it that you think you really need to be allowed to clock in 15 minutes early in order to do your job better, let me know, and I can always negotiate with the Ask office to see if they will fund that. But for now, again, leads should come 15 minutes early and clock in. Other people can do that once, but otherwise clock in at the actual time you're starting and clock out when you're done. And besides that, only rarely would you get paid by the Ask office to do work outside of it. So for example, this meeting, you should report those hours. And when we have mid-semester check-in times, we'll do that. But otherwise, that's about it. Many of you are also TAs for Math CS department. So just make sure you keep very careful separation between where you report those hours. The Math CS department is quite generous in paying RTAs for any work you do outside of your working hours, like responding to an email and things like that. But so if you're doing things for your TA stuff, those can all go on your TA timesheet. But for tutor lab, just report the hours you're actually working in the lab. And they check this very carefully. The Ask office does. I think that's all I'm supposed to say. So maybe Cecilia and Alex, do you want to talk about some stuff?
Yep. We're just going to quickly skim through the rest of this. A lot of you heard the same stuff in the fall. We just want to reiterate it as a little reminder as we go into the new semester. Don't be afraid to work with those scientific students. They're mainly not asking actual syntax questions. They're usually questions about how to approach the assignment. So even if you didn't take scientific and you took intro, you are still able to help out with those students. So if you want to say, yeah, I can help with scientific, just make sure you tell Professor Yang, and he will get that all in there and in our schedule so that we know. Just like you could skim the Moodle and the projects, make sure you're also skimming lecture topics for certain things, like if they've talked about like I++ versus I equals I+1. That's a big one, and students get confused if you bring something up that they haven't learned about yet, understandably so. So just make sure you know what they know. Yeah, try not to give away the solution. Albin talked about that a little bit, but we're really just writing pseudocode and trying to aim them in the right direction. I think like concept maps are sometimes helpful to draw out so that people can see like what questions they need to be asking at each stage of the different parts of the assignment, but try not to write any code unless it's like a very specific, like they have no idea what the syntax is and you're explaining how to get to that correct code syntax. We have the room maps, so grouping students in face-to-face just so that they're not overwhelmed by other subjects. Zoom, more for lead tutors with setting up, but just make sure that you're getting the correct attendance times. You can edit those lead tutors at the end of the session in case somebody forgot to sign out. Make sure that one computer is at all times showing that welcome screen on Zoom in the main room so that students know that they can put themselves in breakout rooms. And then also keep that volume up on whatever computer is having the Zoom so that you can hear when a student pops in, and you can have a tutor go on their own computer and start interacting with that student. I would say make about 2 breakout rooms per course and just make sure that you're labeling those, but keep a couple extra breakout rooms open just in case there's some overflow. Just make sure you're not leaving or being in one room for too long. We don't want to leave any students waiting for 15 minutes. Try to touch base with one student, try to give them a quick explanation if you can. Say that you're going to come back, just leave them to think a little bit, go to another student, and then you can come back. Just so that nobody feels like they're just sitting in a room by themselves waiting to ask a question for too long. I think that's everything that I wanted to go over.
Thanks, Cecilia. Just some extra tutoring approaches, just good practices. Don't write code for them. Obviously, we've said this before, and Dr. Albing said this really well, but don't write code. Try to guide them along idea by idea. A lot of students appreciate pictures, checklists of things to accomplish. Just try to help them break the problem down and solve it themselves. And that's usually a good thing to do. Try to teach them how to use the debugger, and if they don't like the debugger, teach them good debugging practices. These are all things we had to learn at one point, so just try to pass it along. And yeah, really just try to model good coding skills as you're tutoring. Just all the things that you would do if you're doing your own homework, try to teach that to them and hold their hand a little bit through the process, but try to guide them along and get them to that place on their own. So I think that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks. How about other people? Any tips you want to share with one another?
Just a real quick thing to back up the whole point about scientific. I didn't take scientific, I took intro, but I've been tutoring scientific computing actually like a lot past like 2 semesters, and it's really not bad. I've maybe been asked like 5% of the times like how to do something syntax wise in that class. It's almost always like, okay, how do I actually do this problem? Which if you've taken data structures or anything above that, you're more than capable of helping them with that.
I think I forgot to say one thing. There have been times in the past where there's been more of a difficult student to work with. Just know that all the other tutors support you, and they also want to help that student. So if you feel like your approach is not working, or the student is not communicating with you in the best way, feel free to ask another tutor to come alongside you and help you if you have the resources for that, because we don't want anybody to just sit there and be annoyed and not understand how to help the student. The other tutors are also there to help you out.
Other thoughts from other people? As you think of other things, work in your team on each night, work together, help everybody grow together. Later on in the semester, we'll have an all hands check-in meeting where if you're there for last fall, it's really chill. There's no program whatsoever. We're just chatting together about what went well, what should we change and plan for the future. So we'll really rely on your expertise of what you've seen to make this lab better. So keep that in mind as well, that you'll be able to have that chance to really shape next year's CS lab. And as was mentioned a few times, if you want to add courses, today would be a good time to do that. So please stick behind when we're done. And I have one more thing to say, but before that, anything else? Last call.
I had a quick question about lead time sheets. We mark, I think I have like 2 different ones. I put all of my CS lab time under lead, correct?
Except for this meeting. Or if you are subbing to another room and that day and you're not being a lead. And for new leads, Ruth said she'll be there on the first time you're doing things. So she'll be there to support you. Right. So one more thing is that, this year this semester, Bethel is moving towards no Monday chapel. Yeah. And we're being encouraged to form community groups and support one another that way, perhaps during that time or other times. And so I want to put this idea in your head in case you haven't really thought about it before. It's completely optional, but I know many of you are already meeting together regularly and good friends and so forth. If we want a subset of us, and subset could be an empty set or the full set, right? But a subset of us could meet semi-regularly, maybe like every other week or something, get together and pray together, pray for each other, pray for CS Lab, and also just talk about each other's lives. But it could be partially for CS Lab, but it's partially just because we know each other and we can support one another. And so that's an option that we could consider. And that would not, because that's optional, we're not going to pay you to get together and pray. Your reward will be in heaven, right? So I want to mention this idea to you, and maybe in a few days I'll ask to see if there's a few of you who might want to do this. The campus pastor suggests that just to keep the groups accountable and feeling like it's actually going something like about 4 people. So if it's just 2 people, of course you feel free to meet one-on-one and do things and all that stuff. But if we're actually going to sort of form a group to try to semi-regularly get together and commit to praying together, then they suggest getting about 4 people. And I could be there, I could not be there, either way, but I want to possibly organize this and see if we want to do it. Right, so consider this for a bit, and then in a few days I'll probably shoot a quick email out to see where people are. So. Any other questions or concerns?